I think the Democrats are politically smart enough to put things in the memo that require either the Bureau or the Department of Justice to say it needs to be redacted. Therefore, it creates this belief that there's something being hidden from the American people. And I mean, keep in mind, this is the same crowd that voted not to release our memo and voted not to gain a lot of this information over the last 12 months. But unfortunately, we're in an environment where you would include material that you know has to be redacted, and you know responsible people are going to redact it just so that question will be asked.
In terms of the rebuttal to your memo about the FISA abuse, you've read it.
Yes, ma'am.
Does it change anything about your memo, or does it undercut or disprove anything in your memo?
It doesn't to me. Keep in mind, whoever gets to go second, it's always better than going first because you know what you're responding to. Our memo was designed as a notice document to the members of the House Intel Committee on our side that those of us who have seen the underlying material have concerns. And ultimately, it was voted on to release to the whole House, and now it's public. But in its infancy, it was designed to notify other Republican members of what we had seen. The Democrat memo does attempt to rebut some of our points, but I think the salient points made by our memo still exist, and they're still true. A little bit of it is also just creating so much dust and cloud that people just give up and say, well, you're saying X and you're saying Y, I'm just going to tune out. That might be a little part of it, too.
It seems like one of the big bones of contention would be whether or not the dossier was essential to the approval of the FISA surveillance. You have argued that it was essential, that without it, they would never have received the authorization for the warrant from the FISA court. Do they have you said that there's other information about Carter Page. You said there are basically three things. You had the Yahoo News article, the dossier, and other information about Carter Page. Can they argue that that other information was substantial enough for the warrant?
I would find that interesting because they didn't make that argument to the judge. If you have enough without the dossier, then why did you include the dossier? If you have enough without the dossier, why did you in your court filing lead with the dossier? Lawyers don't start with their weakest argument, and you certainly don't start with an argument that you don't need to make and should not have made. So the fact that you used the dossier tells me you must have felt like you needed it, or else you would not have included it in your court filing.
How did they get 4 rounds of approval for the warrant when it looks like they were coming up with not much at all on Carter Page?
You can get a renewal if you have a fact corroborated. That fact could be that X went to Russia, that X sent an email, that X corresponded with someone. I think the threshold for a renewal is that you are gaining some information. How material that information is in the eye of the judge. My focus is on the initial application because that's what started the renewals. But also, Martha, keep in mind the information that Republicans argue should have been in the initial application also was not in the renewals. The bias of some folks who were investigating the president, the bias of Chris Steele, the fact that he was desperate to do anything to prevent President Trump from winning. That's something that a reasonable tribunal would want to know if you're evaluating a source.
Definitely does raise questions about the FISA court, that they didn't scrape beneath the surface and say, why have you included a news article as part of your substantiation here? Doesn't it raise questions about how they're doing their job?
I think most judges don't rely on newspaper articles. I think they're smart enough to discount that. I kind of blame the person who included it, if that's all you got. And I mean, that's almost by definition hearsay is a newspaper article. Look, I rarely miss a chance to blame judges because I used to appear in front of them all the time. I don't blame the judges. I blame the attorneys who are officers of the court. They're not advocates just trying to get a result. You're officers of the court. You have a responsibility to be forthright and honest and candid. And it's not the judge's fault if material information was not provided to him or her.
They're trusting that whatever they've been given by the FBI, the Department of Justice, is what they say it is.
You do have to aver under oath that the underlying material is true to the best of your knowledge. So there's There's a relationship between judges and prosecutors where you're going to tell me the truth and you're not going to surprise me, and that happens 99.9% of the time. Is that relationship, that trust is kept. If I were a judge that had approved one of these applications, maybe I did have enough without the dossier, but I'm going to want to know, particularly with the footnote on the sourcing, the financial sourcing of it. Why did you describe it in such a circuitous, opaque way? Why didn't you just tell me the DNC and Hillary Clinton for America paid for this? Why did you go through all these machinations instead of just saying it in a clear, transparent way? But they didn't.
Bob Goodlatte said that he believed that the memo lays out a case for conspiracy. He used the word conspiracy, which is a crime. Do you agree with that?
I love Chairman Goodlatte. He's one of my favorite colleagues. A conspiracy to me is an agreement, tacit or otherwise, between two people to commit an unlawful act. I used to do those cases. I never allege a conspiracy when simple incompetence will suffice as an explanation. I don't look for some nefarious motive if incompetence or a lack of protocol will explain it. So I would not allege that the Bureau and the Department of Justice had a conspiracy. I got really serious questions about why they handle things certain ways, but I don't start with conspiracy.
So Sally Yates signed off on these FISA warrants. Andrew McCabe signed off on them. So did Rod Rosenstein. You don't believe that they had any conspiratorial drive in presenting that dossier to get that warrant, to listen in on Carter Page's phone calls because they didn't want President Trump to be elected?
That's such a serious allegation. You would have to have something other than the fact that they were signing documents that led me to draw that conclusion. I'm really troubled by what I've read in the struck page text. It is manifest bias in a way that I've never seen it before. That troubles me more than the fact that Rod Rosenstein did not feel the need to do independent research to corroborate assertions made in a court proceeding. If there's no evidence of conspiracy, I am loath to accuse someone of it. So
Chairman Nunes, who you worked with on this memo, has suggested that there's a lot more to come and that the investigation continues. It looks like the next place that you all are looking at is the State Department during the Obama administration. We know that there was a criminal referral that was made by Senators Graham and Grassley. In it, it includes this. The foreign source gave information to an unnamed associate of Hillary and Bill Clinton, who then gave information to an unnamed official in the Obama State Department, who then gave the information to Steele. What do you know about that?
Everything that there is to know about it, and I've known about it for over a month. If you go and read the documents at the Department of Justice, you see it. I'm troubled by it. It is one reason I have tremendous respect for Michael Horowitz, who's the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. It's one reason that I reject the notion that the IG himself alone can investigate the Department of Justice, because there is a State Department component to this. It needs to be investigated. I don't view the investigation in terms of stages. To me, it's just one continuous investigation in pursuit of all relevant facts leading towards the truth. I'm pretty troubled by what I read in the documents with respect to the role the State Department played in the fall of 2016, with including information that was used in a court proceeding. I am troubled by it.
So weeks before the election, somebody in the Obama State Department was feeding information from a foreign source to Christopher Steele.
When you hear who the source, or one of the sources of that information is, you're going to think, oh my gosh, I've heard that name somewhere before. Where could it possibly have been? And
the foreign source?
The domestic source. And I'm trying to think how Secretary Clinton defined him. I think she said he was an old friend who emailed her from time to time.
Sidney Blumenthal?
That'd be really warm. You're warm. Yeah.